Hello again and welcome. Last episode, I spoke with Lisa Owens, one of the co-creators of the Learning Cluster Design Model, on how the model came to be and what went into the process of developing it. Moving on, in this episode, we'll hear from Lisa on what the principles behind the Learning Cluster Design Model are, as well as some reception it's gained in the corporate and learning and development world. Stay tuned to learn more. So continuing on from what we kind of discussed about, we've already touched on, some of the history of how the book came to be and the model itself and how it bloomed kind of on its own through your research and through the workshops you guys are doing and stories you were getting in the feedback. But now I want to touch on what the model actually is. So what is the OKLCD model?
OKLCD model is comprised of 5 actions. And these are actions that L&D is best suited to take, not the HR department, not the IT folks, but L&D because of their expertise with learning. And those 5 actions each have a tool associated with them to help people like you use each of those actions and do it quickly and efficiently with a guide to guide your thinking. That's what the tools do. So the 5 actions, let me run through them briefly. It's change on the job behavior, learn, learner to learner differences, upgrade the existing, surround learners with meaningful learning assets, and track transformation of everyone's results. Now, if you're trying to take notes, don't worry about it. That was a big mouthful. Just go to learningclusterdesign.com and we've got it all laid out there for you so you don't have to take quite so many notes. I hope that helps, but that is the model in and of itself.
Beautiful. Thank you for that breakdown. Now, from my reading, I understand that it is based on 4 principles and 5 actions, like you just mentioned. We'll touch on the 5 actions a little bit more later, but can you elaborate on what the 4 principles are? As I understand, that's essentially the philosophy behind the model, yes?
Yes, absolutely. It's the philosophy. The model may help us accomplish our work, but it's the philosophy underlying all of those pieces of the model that really makes a difference. Let me list off the 4 principles real quick, and then let me go back and explain those just a minute. The first one is beyond one and done. The second is change on the job behavior. The third is focus on diverse learner content. The fourth is design the whole, not just the parts. Now let me go over that. Beyond one and done. What typically happens and has been happening since the 40s, 50s, when instructional design processes first started coming into place, is that when we are asked to fix a problem that needed training, we would create one training program for people to use to help improve their skills. They would come in, get the training, and go out. Now, we've gotten a little better than that in the industry. We use some blended learning. We use longer courses or shorter courses, but in essence, we are always using one course, one program, one set of materials and saying, use this one time and you'll be good. Well, what we do in the Learning Cluster Design Model is instead, we provide a number of learning assets for people to choose from in their moments of learning need so that they can accomplish the work that they need to do. And they can touch those learning assets as many times as they want, not just in the classroom or during formal learning, but when they're on the job at the moment of applying their learning, or when they run into a problem, or when they run into a memory issue. So whatever it is, we are there. We in L&D have changed our job from providing one asset to try to help people improve their performance to creating multiple learning assets to help learners perform on the job, not just in the classroom. That's a big difference. Taking responsibility outside the classroom is a little bit frightening, but that's what it's all about. We need to make a change in the workplace, not just in the classroom. So the second principle is change on the job behavior. So how is it that we're impacting people outside the classroom? We're changing their behavior. That is a surprise to many people. They didn't realize that L&D is about changing behavior. They tend to feed back to us, even as recently as at the ADDIE International Conference that Crystal and I spoke at a few months ago. People were saying it's such a surprise that you think that L&D's job is to change behavior. I thought my job was just to teach them information and learning. This is breakthrough thinking for so many people, but it's what is going to make a difference for L&D as they help the business and our learners perform better in the workplace. So focus on changing on-the-job behavior. The next one is focus on diverse learner content. So what that means is that we typically in L&D focus on a target audience, a large target audience. And that helps us so that we can better define who it is that we're trying to create content for. What we've learned, though, is that the audience is really diverse, and we try to pick out 2 to 5 different groups who have different needs within that target group. And that difference is often based on where they are, when they need to learn, how they learn, and when they want to learn. So with the diverse learner content, we find what they need. One of the keys that we look for in that is, what do they already know? We'll often find a large segment of our target audience who already knows 50 to 80% of the material. And for us to try to force them to go through that content again is a waste of our time and theirs, and is very frustrating to them. So how can we chunk the material so they get only what they need to learn in order to do their job? This is the focus of focusing on diverse learner content. Now, the last one is design the whole, not just the parts. When we do this, we look at all the learning assets and all the learner personas, and we try to marry the two as a whole learning cluster. Now, I know that when we create courses, we often create job aids and other items that help, but often they are created just on the fly or because somebody says, oh, it's a good idea this time. But with a learning cluster, we specifically require that we have to design multiple learning assets, not just if we have time this time or feel like creating a job aid, but every time we're designing all of those things together as a whole. So those are the 4 principles.
That's a beautiful breakdown. Thank you very much. That helped clear up a lot of the philosophy behind it and what really goes into it as far as what this new type of structure is gearing towards. I wanted to ask, based on the model I've looked at throughout the book, there's kind of hints of other models in there. So I was curious about that. Is the OKLCD model meant to compare with the other models such as Bloom's, Kirkpatrick, or design thinking, to name a few, or is it meant to work in harmony with them?
I'm glad you brought up all those models. Again, we want to take the best models that people are using now and help build on those. We want this model to stand on the shoulders of giants, with such as Bloom's, Kirkpatrick, Phillips ROI, design thinking. All of those are very rich models, and no one model can encompass everything. Instead, what the OKLCD model has become is an overarching model, one that integrates many of the models. So if you put the OKLCD model as your primary, then all the other models will either feed into one or more of the actions, or the OKLCD will feed out into those other models. So pick your favorite kind. You don't have to throw them away. We're combining them, we're integrating. For example, with Bloom's taxonomy talks about learning objectives, and the OKLCD model really focuses on learning objectives, but adds to it an extra layer of objective, an overarching objective that we call the strategic performance objective. And everything you know about Bloom's will help you to write a good strategic performance objective. So that's how we use all the different models together. We haven't found any models yet that our users are saying don't integrate. They integrate all of their models, which is wonderful.
Thank you. That helped clear that up for me a little bit. Understood. Thank you for that clarification. Now, with talking about the OKLCD model, and previously you said that you ran this through workshop, people have tested this out, they have used this in their own organizations, in their own L&D departments. Based on what you've seen so far from organizations implementing the OKLCD model, what are the benefits from an organization's C-suite perspective?
Well, the one thing is that if we're trying to measure impact on an organization or ROI, it's hard to take one course and say, oh, it had this impact. People have been trying to do it for years, and it is difficult. A study in 2019 by ATD said that we are not making sufficient progress in our industry to make that connection. So when you have a set of learning assets, there is a greater level of confidence that a set of assets will make an impact on the business because we're addressing first behavior on the job, learner to learner differences, and giving the learners what they need to make that change. Just that story gives the C-suite more confidence that this is going to succeed. Another thing is that when our users, the L&D people, go to the C-suite and start talking about a learning cluster project, they start with the change on the job behavior action. And they start talking about what are the KPIs the business wants to move, what are the behaviors that learners will exhibit when it's working. And just in the fact that they are doing that, the C-suite is able to perceive L&D people as doing more than just creating content. They start to see that L&D is talking about things that they in the C-suite are interested in. So this starts to raise the L&D group as a profession, and that's important. Now, the other thing that the C-suite has been enjoying when they have their L&D people using the learning cluster design model is that they have found that L&D can start to deliver on the problem faster. And the reason for that is they can start doing it piecemeal. They can start adding one learning asset after another. They don't have to deliver one huge, big, one and done training or class all at once. That may take some time to design. Instead, they can start rolling out smaller assets more quickly and start making a difference quick. That's what the C-suite is appreciating from the L&D professionals who are using this model.
Beautiful. And I think you definitely used a better choice of words there as far as what are the benefits was my question, and understanding what would the C-suite appreciate. And I think that's a very distinct clarification. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for sharing the principles behind the learning cluster design model and how it's been received in the world of corporate and learning and development. In our next episode, we'll hear about the 5 action steps of the OKLCD model. Until next time.